Hey there, grade 11s. My name is Miss Nicolak, and I'm a teacher candidate from the University of Manitoba. I'm working with Miss Lambu to teach your next two units, circulation and immunity. So I've chosen to do these video style lectures to help you learn from home. Please watch, and if you ever have any questions or comments, you can always reach out to me on Teams or by email. So let's get started with lesson one. This one's on circulation and vessels. So, in today's lesson, we're going to be learning about why humans require a circulation system to survive, how other organisms or animals transport materials throughout their bodies. We're going to be learning about the three components of the human circulatory system, and then we're going to finish off with different types of blood vessels found in our bodies. So, the question is, why do we need a circulation system? Well, all organisms acquire nutrients and oxygen and expel metabolic waste in order to survive. A circulation system transports these materials around the body from their sources to their destinations. So, some examples in our bodies would be oxygen. Oxygen enters the body through our respiratory tract, travels from our nasal passages or our mouth down to our lungs. The alveoli fill with air, and that's the site where capillaries will take up the oxygen from the alveoli and bring it into the bloodstream. If you can recall from the digestion unit, nutrients enter the bloodstream from the small intestine. Carbon dioxide enters the blood from body tissues. So, at our cellular level, our cells undergo a process called cellular respiration, where oxygen is used to produce ATP, and a waste product of that reaction is carbon dioxide. So, carbon dioxide is always being produced at our cellular level, and our transportation system or circulation system is going to move that carbon dioxide out of the body. It does so by traveling through the bloodstream back to the heart. The heart will pump that blood to our lungs, where when we exhale, the air leaves our body in the form of carbon dioxide. Okay, so let's have a look at circulation systems that are found in a variety of organisms known to our natural world. We're going to start small with unicellular organisms, things like yeast, used to make bread, paramecium, which is an aquatic organism, and we've got algae, which I'm sure you're familiar with if you've been to the lake. Pictured here is Cynodesmus. It's a type of aquatic algae, very small, so it has its own way of transporting materials throughout its body. Next, we have multicellular organisms. Those are bigger things, things you're probably a little more familiar with. And we've got two branches of circulation systems found in multicellular organisms. First is the open circulation system, which includes arthropods or mollusks. So here we've got a honeybee and a snail, honeybee belonging to the arthropod group and a snail belonging to the mollusk group. And then we've got a closed circulation system, which is going to include chordates and annelids. This leopard frog pictured here is a chordate, and an annelid is a segmented worm like this earthworm. Let's have a closer look at unicellular organisms and how they transport materials around their body. So, because of their size, unicellular organisms are so small that they do not require a sophisticated circulation system to move things around their body. They don't have a heart to pump blood through their vessels or lungs to get to acquire oxygen. Everything just happens within that one small cell. So, this example pictured here is called a euglena. It's a type of algae. They're able to acquire nutrients from their chloroplasts. Those are cells that are able to undergo photosynthesis to capture energy from the sun. In terms of diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide, these gases simply pass through the cellular membrane, and the organism is able to acquire as much oxygen as they need, and they're able to easily dispel the carbon dioxide as waste. So let's have a closer look at what the open circulation system looks like. As organisms get larger, they require a system to move these materials, such as nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide, through their anatomy. So organisms such as arthropods, insects, crustaceans, or mollusks, snails, and octopi, they have what's called an open circulatory system. So they can have one, two, three, multiple hearts. They're going to pump blood through vessels to reach the tissues. This blood is then deposited into a cavity called a hemocoel. And what ends up happening, instead of traveling back to the heart through vessels, which is a closed circulation system, blood travels back to the heart gradually through diffusion. So an open circulation system uses less energy than a closed circulation system, but it is efficient for the animals that have adapted to this circulation system. All right, lastly, let's look at the closed circulation system. This is the system you're likely most familiar with because it is the system that human beings have. Other organisms that have a closed circulation system include chordates, so mammals, fishes, anything that has a spinal cord is considered a chordate. Also, this group called Annelida, so that includes earthworms and leeches. They have this closed circulatory system. So, similar to the open circulatory system, in that we have a heart that's going to pump blood through vessels. These vessels reach the tissues, but instead of gradually diffusing back to the heart, a closed circulation system has this network of vessels that's going to take that blood back to the heart to be pumped out once again. Okay, so from this point forward, when we talk about circulation systems, we're going to be talking about the circulation system of the human body. So let's look at some of the functions of why we have the circulation system. So we require this system to deliver oxygen and nutrients to tissues. These materials are carried by our blood. So our red blood cells, the oxygen is going to bind to those cells and transport to the tissues. And the nutrients from the small intestine are actually going to be deposited in a substance called plasma. The circulation system removes metabolic waste from tissues. So this could be carbon dioxide or even urea. These waste products are going to be transported away from tissues through the blood. Hormones are transported through the body. Our circulation system also helps distribute heat energy from muscle tissue. So this concept of thermoregulation is to keep the body warm, contributes to homeostasis, and we have our circulation system to thank for that. So let's talk about the main components of the human circulatory system. We've got three main components. First being blood. Blood is composed of plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. We're going to go into great detail about blood later on in this unit, so stay tuned. Next, we've got vessels. So vessels are the passages which carry blood throughout the body. We've got three main types of vessels. First being arteries, vessels that carry blood away from the heart. We've got veins, vessels that carry blood back to the heart. And then we've got a third called capillaries or capillaries, which are on the tissue cellular level, and that's where oxygen and carbon dioxide will be exchanged between tissues and the bloodstream. Last, we've got the heart, this very hardworking muscle found in our chest. The heart works to move blood throughout our body, and the primary function is to make sure that oxygen is reaching our tissues, because without oxygen, our cells would die fast. Okay, so I have this analogy that describes the main components of the human circulatory system. So first we have blood. And the way I like to think about blood is it's the vehicle through which materials are transported by. So you can look at the image of the red blood cells on this side, and you can think that these red blood cells are going to be carrying oxygen or carbon dioxide, depending on whether they're traveling away from the heart or back to the heart. But the components of blood are kind of like the vehicles that facilitate transport throughout our body. So the next part of our analogy are going to talk about how veins are similar to roads. So we've got these arteries and veins which flow in opposite directions, arteries carrying blood away from the heart and veins carrying blood back to the heart. But the roads which the blood travels on are vessels. You can almost picture the cars in the picture as red blood cells carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide to and from the heart. To complete the analogy, we have our heart. So I like to think of the human heart as this motor which works day in and day out to move our blood, which we can think of as vehicles, down these highways, which we can consider our vessels. There are three categories of blood vessels. First, we have arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Most times, blood leaving the heart is going to be very oxygen rich so that that oxygen can be carried to our body tissues. There is one exception to this rule, and we'll go into that towards the end of the lesson. Next, we have veins. Veins carry blood back toward the heart. Often, blood in veins is very oxygen poor or deoxygenated. And last, we have capillaries. Capillaries are these microscopic vessels that are found at the body tissues. You can't really say that capillaries are oxygen rich or oxygen poor because it's the site where gas exchange occurs. So capillaries are kind of both oxygen rich and oxygen poor. Let's go into a little more detail about what arteries are. So, arteries are vessels that carry oxygen rich or oxygenated blood away from the heart. Arteries are elastic and durable in nature, and this is to withstand the high pressure of blood that's exerted from the heart muscle. Arteries are made of 3 layers of tissue. We've got this outer, tough connective tissue to protect the artery. We've got this middle smooth layer that kind of allows for some more elasticity to withstand that high pressure exerted from the heart muscle. We've got this inner endothelial layer. It's going to be 1 cell thick, but closer to the aorta, which is the major vessel leaving the heart. There's a lot of pressure, so that endothelial layer gets a little bit thicker. So as we leave the heart and we get closer and closer to our tissues, arteries get smaller and smaller. And as they get further and further away from the heart, they get a new name called arterioles. Arterioles are found closer to capillaries. Capillaries. Capillaries are tiny. They are on the microscopic level, vessels that interact directly with our tissues. Some of the materials in blood that are exchanged between capillaries and body tissues are oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and waste products like urea. It's really important that capillaries are 1 cell thick. If they were thicker, then diffusion wouldn't occur as easily, and diffusion is how transport is accomplished between capillaries and tissues. When you're exercising vigorously, your capillaries can expand a little bit to allow increased flow of red blood cells. So that means more oxygen traveling to your tissues. Capillaries are the link of this network of vessels that are going to link together arterioles and venules. Veins are vessels that carry oxygen poor or deoxygenated blood toward the heart. Veins are larger in diameter than arteries, and they're similar in composition of tissue. It's just the proportions are a little bit different. So we still have that outside connective tissue protecting the vein. In the middle, we still have that smooth muscle. There's just a little bit less than what would be found in the arteries. And in the middle, we still have that single-celled endothelial tissue. Veins work against gravity. Arteries are assisted by the pumping motion of the heart. But if you think about your lower body, your feet, legs, blood moving back to the heart is going to need some assistance. So the veins have 2 structures that help them move blood back to the heart. They have these periodic valves. So valves allow blood to move in one direction, but they'll prevent blood from flowing back towards your feet. And then the veins also rely on your skeletal muscles to help move blood back to the heart. So just simple movements, the muscles will push against the veins and push that blood back towards the heart. Similar to the arterioles, veins are very large, close to the heart, but as you move closer and closer to the capillaries, we've got venules that connect capillaries, venules, and then veins going back to the heart. So here's an image that shows arteries, capillaries, and veins meeting up at the tissue level. You can see that the red vessels are arteries. That's the oxygenated blood meeting the tissues. The gas exchange occurs within the tissues, and oxygen is deposited into the tissues, and deoxygenated blood enters the venules, which travel back to the heart. So, a few things to remember. Arteries transport blood away from the heart. Veins transport blood toward the heart. Arteries carry oxygenated or oxygen-rich blood towards the body, and veins carry oxygen-poor or deoxygenated blood toward the heart. However, there are 2 exceptions. The exceptions to this rule are the pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary veins. These are vessels that are connected directly to the heart. So, as you remember, uh, deoxygenated blood travels from the veins to the heart. But the blood doesn't become oxygenated in the heart, it becomes oxygenated in the lungs. So we need vessels that are going to transport blood from the heart to the lungs to get that oxygen, and then vessels to return it to the heart, where it will then be pumped out to the rest of the body. The pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary veins transport blood between the heart and the lungs. So, through the pulmonary arteries, blood moves from the heart to the lungs to be oxygenated. Um, the blood in the pulmonary arteries will have the lowest concentration of oxygen in the body. But because blood is moving away from the heart, these vessels are still called arteries. So, gas exchange occurs in the lungs, and blood is moving from the lungs back to the heart through the pulmonary vein. In this vein, blood has the highest concentration of oxygen in the body. But because blood is moving toward the heart, we still call this vessel a vein. So that concludes lesson 1 on circulation and vessels. A couple key components I want you to take away from the lesson are: what is the function of the circulation system? What is its purpose and what does it transport? What are different types of circulation systems found in single-celled and multi-celled organisms? So we saw the gas exchange occurring in the single-celled organisms, and then we saw the two different systems, closed and open circulatory systems with larger animals. What are the main components of the circulation system? We have our blood, vessels, and heart. We will go into further detail on blood and the heart later on in this unit. What types of blood vessels are found in the body? We have our arteries, which carry blood away from the heart, veins, which carry blood back towards the heart, and then we have capillaries, which is a site of gas exchange in our tissues. How do the structures of vessels differ from one another? We know that capillaries are tiny and one-celled thick. We want to make sure that we understand that the vessel thickness is essential for diffusion. Arteries have these thick, smooth muscle layers in the middle, whereas veins are a bit larger in diameter but require the assistance of valves to keep blood moving back to the heart. And lastly, what are pulmonary arteries and veins? Just knowing where these vessels are located and how they're different from other arteries and veins. So with lesson 1, I've also given you assignment 1. It's a list of questions that's supposed to demonstrate your understanding of the material that was presented in this video or in the notes. Question number 1 is asking you to list 4 functions of the circulation system. Question number 2 is asking you to explain why humans require a circulation system, whereas an organism like algae does not. Think about the size of the organism and why we might require a more sophisticated system. Number 3 is asking you to compare and contrast arteries, capillaries, and veins. You want to include information on their location and their structure. If possible, please include a hand-drawn diagram in your answer. Throughout my years of studies, I've always found that hand-drawing things helps me learn a little bit better. And the last 2 questions are research on disorders of the circulatory system. Atherosclerosis is a condition pertaining to the arteries, and an aneurysm is a bulge in a vessel. I'd like you to do some research on these 2 disorders and talk about what causes them, what are the treatments. More details are included in the assignment, as well as some links to articles and videos that will help you understand what these disorders are about. If you choose to use resources that aren't included in the assignment, I am okay with that. But the links are there to help you get started. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can reach me on Microsoft Teams or my email, which is posted at the start of the lesson. Thanks for your time.